Welcome back. This is another episode of Leadership Synergized, where we present guests who have been there, done that, had lessons that they've learned throughout their maturation as a child of God, as a family individual, man or woman, and as a leader. And I know you're going to enjoy having our guest from last week, Dr. James Sigler, back just as much, if not more, as I do. Dr. Sigler, welcome back, my friend. Thank you. Great words of wisdom last week.
I appreciate it. Appreciate the time.
Well, listen, my brother, it's me that appreciates it. And I know taking time from your family, as we record, it's marching band season, right? And I'm not sure I introduced this properly last week, but you live in Southern Indiana, and marching band is big on the state. And I've often referenced, and maybe even a time or two here on this show, but throughout my life, right, I had zero athletic talent physically, right? I didn't know how to build that talent back, in my day, the 60s and 70s in that regard. Wasn't in tune enough. But, some of my my heroes in the younger days were coaches, in our school, or people like John Wooden, the Dean Smith you would follow, for the game of the week back then, right? Now you got games every morning, noon and night, on the sports channels. But I have to tell you, even though my admiration when I watched them and the work ethic they had as coaches, the one person that always jumps out at me that worked the hardest and had greatest success was our band director. And he had some physical and health ailments that made it more difficult for him than others, I'm sure. But I was just in awe. And I could blow a note from a C to a B flat to a Z, whatever it might be in that regard. But to this day, just have so much admiration for what he was able to accomplish. And those individuals, putting together a marching band show is not an easy thing. And it takes a lot of parent support.
100%. 100%. I was definitely with you. I did not have a lot of athletic talent, but I played sports. And then, of course, the good Lord blessed me with two children who were like, sports, okay. Right. And went in a different. So the learning maturation process for me for marching band has been one for sure, but they love it. They're doing great. And it's definitely a busy season.
Dr. Sigler, one of the things through my maturation process, I'm curious, your experience here is, and in my younger days, right, to your point, a lot of selfishness on my part in that regard, even raising a family in that fashion. But, as our two sons got to the point of where they were stepping into college, then into their lives, their married lives, now family, fathers and husbands, my wife and I talk a great deal of the time, how much we learn from them and how much we have learned from them, almost to the point you feel guilty. Are they teaching me more than I ever taught them, type of thing?
100%. I think we talked about last week, my daughter just went to college, and it's amazing to think about the conversations that she has with my wife and myself now and how that's changed. And we're talking like 3 weeks, right? and you know what I'm talking about? Like all of a sudden, the world is their oyster.
Yeah.
You know everything, right? It's like we went from dorm life. Now we're talking about like, oh, we need to rent a house. It's like, who's this we? What goes into that? And she's giving me like a play-by-play. And I'm like, are you giving me like a business outline right now? She's like, I'm trying. When it comes through. And then, for my son, for his, marching band, just to watch them grow, I think it's amazing. I think everyone has this in their life too. That 8th grade to freshman year, there's kind of that weird growth. And then as they progress through high school, and then as they get out of high school, they go to college. And as they keep going, it's amazing to see their maturity level, their thought process, their decision-making change, and at the same time, it's a change. And I see the transformation, right? So piggybacking off of last week, they're transforming as individuals and young adults, and they're getting on with their lives. And how does that transform us, right? We talked about that. You talk about being empty nesters. I'm going to have to take some notes because we're getting closer to that piece. And how do my wife and I, how do we transform into those things? We dig a little deeper spiritually. We have stronger conversations, right? Like our world has changed a little bit where it's not focused solely, on preserving the well-being of the children, right? They have to start making some of those things. So yeah, I think it's impactful. Absolutely.
Dr. Sigler, one thing that just comes to my mind during our week plus discussion, the one thing we haven't done much of is dive directly into your career path.
Mm,
And, I appreciate that through our discussion point, because I can tell you part of my regrets I have is I put too much of who I was into what my career was in that setting. As I reflect back, I honestly can say I never chased a title. I chased the responsibility of a job. Even when I didn't truly, and this is true in every aspect, every job I took from that was the next step, I had no idea what I was saying yes to. So when individuals ask me today, should I do this job or that job, and I ask them, are you ready? They say yes. I'm going to say you're wrong, because
mm,
there's a yes, absolutely, but there's a no that goes with that. And if you can't see that, the self-awareness may not be at the level to where you're ready for that piece, because the no just comes from the point of you have no idea what's coming at you in any way, shape, or form. And I love the fact that James Sigler, Dr. Sigler, it's his title is not who he is. Talk a little bit about any adjustments or battles you've had with that in your life and career.
sure, hitting the nail on the head on that one. God bless you for loving the responsibility. I think I'm in that phase of my life now where I've transformed, and I love that. But what I love from the responsibility aspect of it is I've always enjoyed helping those around me. But in my early career, I definitely was chasing the title. I think it's a Jim Sullivan book, right, where he's talking about what got you here won't get you
Mm.
there, and I love that book, mainly because we always think moving up through the ranks. Maybe you're early in your leadership career, or maybe you're later, right, and you're making that transformation into a new role. I almost can say with 100% accuracy, you don't know what you're getting into until you get there, right? The grass is not always greener on the other side. So I think
Sometimes there's
regardless,
no grass.
yeah, sometimes there's definitely no grass, and that's how you got that position. So keep that, sometimes you have to grow your own grass to make it happen. But I was definitely like, I wanted the next step. I wanted the next step because that to me was how I defined me. And I think this talks back to where are you at spiritually? Where are you at with yourself? I talk about this a lot with underclassmen and doctorate students and the way through. It's like, do you know you? So what do I mean by that? Do you know you? Do you know your leadership style? Do you know what motivates you? At the time, I didn't know it, but I was definitely motivated by title. And we
Mm.
talked about it last week, right? Like, I want to be on the top end. I want to be top five. I want to be top one. I don't want to be bottom five, right? So I
Mm.
was definitely chasing that piece of it. I think I enjoyed the responsibility from the set that people had to ask me to get things done. Well, there's no
Mm.
better picture in life, right, than human nature and being rebellious against the Lord than when we think we have that God complex, air quotes. It's like, I need your decision on this. Ooh, there is no better high in leadership, right? Like we live on, I don't care what kind of leadership style you're in. It's like, yes, that's what I'm talking about. Let me tell you about what you need to be doing. And then eventually we transform and we're like, why don't you tell me what you're into? And we go about it a different way. And I think we've talked offline a couple times where I think there's three big progressions when it comes to those things in our leadership journey. We start as a boss, right? When we first walk in, the dreaded B word, and I know nobody likes using that word, but you know what? That's what we are when we walk in the door and we're brand new, right? We're putting our line in the sand. I'm going to tell you my expectations. We're going to get there. And eventually we hope we move into that coaching, right? I'm going to coach you up for performance. We're having a little bit more dialogue, a little bit of trust is being built. But what's really cool is when you really classify yourself as a mentor. And I learned this going through some private sector things. The mentor part's cool. The mentor part is that team or that individual is coming to you to swap ideas, right? To have a conversation. And your goal in that mentorship role is try to lead them down a path, right? I'm not forcing it down here. I'm not telling you you have to do it, right? I'm just trying to lead you the right way. And man, if that doesn't talk about every time we pick up the Bible and you get something a little bit different, right? Just trying to lead you to where you need to be. And I think that's so understated sometimes, if that's even possible, right? to understate that transformation process to piggyback from boss to coach to mentor and then to go back when we are still, right? And beautiful things happen.
You mentioned last week, and you just mentioned again, how how each time you review something in the Bible, there's just a little bit more we take away. And, my wife and I, as we record this, are just starting with a small group, with our church, and we're right back. The first week of study for us is Genesis, right? Well, I can go back a number of decades. Well, why do I need to read Genesis again? I know it starts in the beginning, God, right? In that piece. But reading the excerpts for the small group discussion that we'll have coming up at the next Sunday meeting, it's just a reminder to your point on that still piece again, if they had just not eaten from the forbidden fruit piece as they were guided, just be still and know he's God. And I take that point as I read it and I go through my life. Wow, 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 wow. It says it all just right there in that whole aspect. And as leaders every day, and I alluded to it just a little bit last week, I think, Dr. Sigler, but self-awareness is just huge, especially in this world today where there's so much busyness, right? Doesn't matter if we've got 100 people reporting to us, thousands, we're a CEO running a global business, or we're just a single individual contributor in the regard of organizational reports. We are not doing ourselves, our Father, our people around us, family, co-workers, justice, if we're not aware in every moment of who we are, what we can take away about who we are, and then what can we do with what we take away.
Oh, whew. Preaching now. I love it. It's awareness. Boy, that's another one of our leadership business terms, right? That gets put out there, but I think sometimes it gets understated. And I alluded to it, I don't know if it was last week or when we were talking this week, right? In those classes and those things, do you know your leadership style? Do you know you? What gets you up in the morning, right? What gets you going? Because I think sometimes it's understated too. As leaders, we need to refuel and recharge. Are we aware when our battery's running low? Do we understand that our batteries are running low? And then we as leaders reach out for help. I think there's a lot of times we automatically put somebody up on a pedestal. There's only one perfect being that's ever walked the earth, and that's been Jesus. Okay, we're not going to get there. All right. I cannot be on site and location 24/7, right? Do we have the awareness to know how we can influence and those decision makers? Do we have somebody that we can lean to? For me, it's my wife, right? Sounding board sounds kind of that way for you too, Dr. Smith. When it comes through, maybe it's biblically, we need to recharge that battery as well. And I think sometimes the awareness piece, we always kind of go to the third person, but I think it's highly transformational when we look inwardly too. It's okay to be a little selfish sometimes. And I mean it in this context. If you are not aware that you're running low, right? If you're an energy person, if you're a person that's like, you know what? I love these last 2 weeks of videos. I think I'm kind of into this whole servant leadership thing. The energy level it takes to be on, right? To do that, to be trans in our thoughts and our words and our deeds. Take that time. What is that? What's your outlets, right? What do you need to get going in the morning? So for me, I've challenged myself. I just open up a book of scripture every morning, and that just kind of sets the day. It could be random. It could be, deep into something. It could be something from, last Sunday or wherever it was, right? That comes with it. And it's just a time for that reflection and to be retrospective, to really think about how is my battery charged, right? And I think people do it without knowing it, right? Like, what's your morning routine? Is it I get up, I stretch, brush my teeth, I get going? Well, that's all stuff we do, right? I love it went viral for a while. Like, what's the first thing you do in the morning? It's like, I make my bed. And if you've not taken the time to read that small book, I think it's lovely. It's like sense of accomplishment. He knows purpose. He or she knows purpose when it comes into it, right? I'm engaged. My brain's working. But find a way for you as your emerging leader or an established leader that we find a way to recharge and re-engage ourselves, because we are of no service to anyone else if our battery's low.
Last week you hit up on the T in my still model of life success. You just hit on the S, and to your point, this is one thing. I don't know about you early on in my career. If I took a vacation, if I took a day off, man, my mind wasn't where it should have been. And I felt guilty in that piece, not because I didn't trust the team around me, because look, The successes I had are fully because of the talents others had. I never in my mind thought that I can do it better than them, so I have to be there. But I felt guilty from the standpoint, what if they would need me for that one moment piece, right? Even if it meant a Saturday, Sunday work to appease an automotive OEM with a quality issue they had, right? And to avoid that dreaded 50 or 100 or whatever it ended up being per hour downtime charge that they would present. But the S in the still just basically says serve, but serve self, not selfishly, to increase your own value. Because it's when we don't serve ourselves and get that time to, as Dr. Covey said in the 7 Habits, to sharpen the saw, to reflect, to recharge the battery. That's when we're being selfish, because we're cheating those that we're responsible to serve out of higher level of skill and value that we can bring to them.
Oh, 100%. Couldn't have said it any better. That's why we're doing this, right? Like it's so simplistic, but goodness sakes.
It's a challenge.
It's such a challenge. It's a barrier. I'm a big barrier to execution person, right? I think as strong leaders and servants of the Lord, we want to remove barriers, right? We're called to make disciples of all nations. And I think we carry that over into our leadership structure. We want everybody on board, right? Little Jim Collins, like, who am I got on the bus?
Yeah.
Right. It's like, who's on the bus with me, right? And if you don't know yourself, right, little Shakespearean, to thy own self be true, right? Like that it comes through with it. It's so impactful. And I hope, those listening and those watching, take that time. When you're on vacation, be on vacation, right? You've set that time aside. If you've learned nothing, nothing else from our experience, is like, you don't get that time back, right? We talked about that last week. But at the same time, it is a disservice to those around you. Plus, you're stunting their growth. So if you want to look at it from a needs perspective, if we're talking about servant leadership or Maslow's laws, right, of needs hierarchy that comes through with it, if you never allow them to face adversity, right, if you never allow them to take the risk that we talked about last week, which was important, right, if you never allow them to transform their thought, word, and deed into what they're doing, what's happening? You've become a barrier to their progression, their transformation, right? It's scripturally, right? Jesus gave us all the tools, but what's the coolest thing? It's like, still allow you to be you, right? When it comes through, you have to understand that you cannot be there 24/7. You cannot do it for. And the best we can do is what we have, right? The old toolbox analogy is like, I bring a toolbox with me every day. I have a certain amount of tools in my toolbox. Man, isn't it just human nature to think, if I just had that other tool, today would have been so much smoother. Why cannot, right? You just cannot be happy with the tools that we have. And that's okay. It's okay to be reflective and to think about, I need to add that tool to my toolbox. But what are you doing in the moment? And that's to be still. And I love that.
Well said, my friend. Well, as we head down the home stretch here with our 2-week discussion, what one piece of advice would you offer those leaders, as you mentioned, just starting out and looking for tools to put into that toolbox that you've taken away?
My number one, be inquisitive, ask questions. I think we downplay this a lot because we're in a leadership role and we want to show that we know things. I have learned more in life, more in business, more in my faith, more in my marriage, more from my kids. Just be inquisitive, right? Not to, if you're really curious, go look at the Ted Lasso clip. You can find it where he's throwing darts, but I use this in the classroom and settings and I think it hits it, right? But be inquisitive. I love people that ask questions. Why? You're engaged. If you're asking a question, you're engaged. What do I get from a question? I get way more when I ask a question and then I have to be quiet, learning and finding out about my teams, about my job, about those relationships that we're trying to build. It's so hard for us, I think, as leaders to just be still and be quiet, but be inquisitive, be resourceful, right? It's amazing what people will tell you if you actually go into it with a positive understanding that we're looking for alignment, right? I want to know about you as the individual, what makes you tick. All of those things I can get from just asking questions. Be inquisitive.
Great advice. So taking that advice back to Dr. Sigler, in the moment, what's next for you? Where's your focus at on that next tool for the leadership toolbox or the next growth opportunity?
For myself, I did a publication. I did, in the good Lord's blessings, obviously, did some conference things. For me, my goal, my bucket list kind of thing is writing a book. That's the next hit, right? We all talk about it. It's like, oh, maybe we should do that. But that's where I'm at. So I'm super inquisitive, right? It's a qualitative researcher in me, I guess, where I want to know about the lived experience of
Yeah.
people. So that's the next step, I think.
Dr. Sigler, for those watching that would like to get a little more of your advice or just maybe pick up on a topic you've had these 2 weeks, how can they find you?
Absolutely. You can reach out to me at Oakland City University. My questionable mugshot is up there, but you can definitely reach out to email or call the campus directory, jsigler@oak.edu. Love to spend time with you if you found anything fascinating, or maybe there's some comments that we can share, we can grow together. That would be lovely.
My friend, my brother, I love you very much, and I appreciate and love what you stand for. And just God bless you for being here. This means the world to me, and my words can never show the appreciation that I would like for you to hear.
It goes both ways. I've learned so much. So I appreciate you and your time, and thank you for those that listen too. So like this guy, he's got good stuff.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you for watching and taking the time these past 2 weeks for the powerful words of wisdom from Dr. Sigler. I know there's some things out there you can put into your toolbox. I encourage you to reach out. This man's brain, he may have the same haircut line that I do, but his brain is outstanding with leadership and experiences. And I'm not sure I've worked alongside or met anyone as consistently at peace with who he is, the comfort in his own skin, and the consistency and constancy of purpose with guidance and support that he'll come alongside you with. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. For Dr. Sigler, I'm Kevin Smith. God bless you. We love you. And remember, it starts, it moves, and it ends through still. Have a great day.